I think I'm in the wrong room. Lena Mensa's voice barely made it past her lips. The hospital lights were too bright. The air smelled like antiseptic and something metallic. Her fore tugged when she shifted, panic blooming slowly through the fog of medication. She hadn't meant to wake up here. She hadn't meant to wake up beside someone else. The man in the bed across from her was already awake. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't reach for the call button like a normal patient would. He just watched her. There was no anger in his eyes. No surprise either. Only calculation, cold, controlled, and terrifyingly calm. The kind of gaze that didn't ask questions because it already knew the answers. Outside the door, she could hear footsteps. Not nurses. Not hurried. Measured. Guarded. This room was empty, Lena whispered, more to herself than to him. Her heart hammered. They told me it was empty. The man finally spoke. His voice was low, even edged with something dangerous beneath the restraint. It was something about the way he said it told her this wasn't a mistake she could apologize her way out of. Before she could say anything else, the door opened. A man in a black suit stepped in, froze mid-step, and looked at the patient in the bed. Then at Lena, his face drained of color. "Boss," he said quietly. She wasn't supposed to be here. The man's eyes never left Lena. "She's here now," he replied. And in that moment, before Lena knew his name, before she understood why the hallway outside was suddenly filled with men who didn't look like hospital staff, her life split cleanly in two. To understand how Lena Mensa, a gentle woman who wanted nothing more than to heal and disappear quietly back into her life, ended up sleeping in the most protected hospital room in Seoul, beside Choi Tae-won, a man the city feared in silence. We have to go back. Back to the night her body gave out. Back to the hospital that thought a room was just a room. Back to the moment destiny decided not to ask permission. The night Lena Mensa thought she was safe began with the lie hospitals were good at telling. That once you were admitted, once your name was written on a chart and a bracelet snapped around your wrist, the world would soften its grip on you. She believed it because she needed to. Her body had given out without warning. Dizziness blooming into darkness. Pain folding her inward until Floor rushed up to meet her. Someone had called for help. Someone had said her name. After that, everything blurred into lights and voices and hands that felt far away. By the time consciousness returned, exhaustion sat heavy in her bones. Deeper than sleep, heavier than fear. They wheeled her down a quiet corridor long after visiting hours ended. The hospital had settled into its night rhythm. Machines humming. Shoes squeaking softly, murmured conversations carried like echoes. Lena barely registered the nurse's voice explaining medications and monitoring and rest. Rest was the only word that stayed with her. "You're safe here," the nurse said, almost absently, as she guided the bed into a private room. "Just try to sleep." The room was dim, curtains drawn, one bed already made. It felt, still, empty, like a place meant to hold nothing but breath and recovery. Lena didn't question it. She didn't have the strength to. They helped her settle, adjusted the floor, checked her vitals. Someone tucked the blanket around her shoulders with gentleness that nearly made her cry. When the door finally closed, the silence pressed in, not frightening, just thick, protective. For the first time in weeks, Lena let herself exhale without bracing for what came next. Her life outside these walls had been a series of held breaths. Work that demanded more than it gave back. Relationships that took her softness and returned indifference. Nights where sleep came in fragments, interrupted by memories she never spoke aloud. She had learned to move quietly through the world, to make herself small, to believe that staying unnoticed was the same as staying safe. Tonight, she let go. The medication pulled at her gently, a tide drawing her under. Her eyes fluttered closed. The ceiling lights blurred into shadows. Her thoughts slowed, unspooling without urgency. She didn't hear the door open. She didn't hear the subtle shift in the room, the kind of shift animals sense before storms. She slept. When she stirred again, it wasn't pain that woke her. It was awareness, the sensation that she was not alone. Her eyes opened slowly, pupils adjusting to the low light. The first thing she noticed was the sound of breathing that wasn't hers. Steady, controlled, too deliberate for sleep. Her heart skipped. She turned her head. The other bed wasn't empty. A man lay there, propped slightly upright, dark hair shadowed by the dim glow of a monitor. His face was sharp, composed even in stillness, as if rest were something he allowed rather than needed. His eyes were open, fixed on her with an intensity that cut clean to the haze of medication. He didn't look surprised. He looked assessing. Lena's mouth went dry. Panic stirred, slow but insistent. Hospitals didn't put strangers together in private rooms. They didn't place women recovering from collapse beside men who looked like they belonged to a different, far more dangerous world. Her voice came out thin. She swallowed and tried again. I think I'm in the wrong room. The words sounded small, inadequate against the weight of his silence. He didn't answer right away. His gaze moved over her, not invasive, not hungry, measuring, as if committing her presence to memory, as if calculating variables she couldn't see. Outside the door, footsteps passed, paused, then moved on. Lena noticed then the difference between the normal chaos of a hospital and the quiet outside this room. It wasn't empty. It was controlled. This room was empty, she whispered, needing to believe it. It was, he said. His voice was low, even, with an accent she couldn't place precisely. Not harsh, not kind, simply certain. Something in her chest tightened. She clutched the blanket closer, instinctive, protective. They told me it was safe. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not guilt, not anger, interest. Nothing about this room is accidental, he said. Before she could ask what that meant, the door opened. A man in a black suit stepped inside, then froze. His eyes flicked from Lena to the man in the bed. Color drained from his face. "Boss," he said quietly. She wasn't supposed to be here. The man beside her never looked away from Lena. "She's here now," he replied. And in that moment, Lena understood with terrifying clarity that the safety she thought she'd found was never real. It had only been borrowed. And whatever world this man belonged to, she had crossed into it without meaning to, tired, vulnerable, and unaware that destiny sometimes arrived dressed as a mistake. Choi Tae-won woke the way he always did. Fully aware, pain threaded through his side in a dull, familiar way. Sharp enough to remind him he was alive, controlled enough not to distract him. The machines beside his bed hummed in steady rhythm. The room smelled of antiseptic and quiet money. Private care, private wing, guard station just far enough away to be invisible. Nothing moved without his knowledge. Nothing entered without permission, which was why the presence beside him registered before his eyes opened. Breathing, soft, uneven, too close. His hand twitched beneath the blanket, fingers tightening instinctively, ready for a threat that hadn't yet revealed itself. Tae-won opened his eyes slowly, letting the room come into focus piece by piece. Shadows first, the faint glow of monitors, the curtain half drawn where it should have been sealed. Then he saw her. She was asleep in the bed opposite his, turned slightly on her side, dark curls spilling over the pillow. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, lashes resting against her cheeks, lips parted just enough to suggest fragile, borrowed rest. A clear four-line traced from her wrist, disappearing beneath the blanket. She didn't belong here. Every part of his mind cataloged the error in seconds. Female, unarmed, hospital patient, no visible panic response, no defensive posture. She wasn't pretending to sleep. She hadn't crept in. She had been placed. Mistakes happen in the outside world. They did not happen in his. Tae-won stayed still, watching her breathe. There was no fear in her body, no tension coiled beneath the skin. Whatever life she carried outside this room had worn her thin. But here, now, she had let herself go slack with trust. It unsettled him. He had spent years cultivating spaces where fear did the work for him, rooms where people entered already braced for impact, where silence weighed heavier than threats. This woman lay within arm's reach of him and slept as if nothing in the world could touch her. He should have woken her immediately, pressed the call button, had her removed, the breach sealed, the error corrected and erased. Instead, he watched. There was something about the way she held herself even in sleep, small but not weak, as if softness were a choice she made deliberately, not something the world had taken from her yet. Minutes passed. Her breathing hitched, a faint sound leaving her throat, and she shifted restlessly. Taewon felt it then, an unexpected pull of awareness, sharp as a blade sliding free of its sheath. He sat up slightly, the movement controlled despite the pain it cost him. Her eyes fluttered open. Confusion came first, then alertness, then fear, quick and honest. She began, stopping when her voice cracked. She swallowed and tried again. I think I'm in the wrong room. The words were soft, apologetic, as if she'd inconvenienced him by existing. Taewon studied her closely now. Not the way men studied women when they wanted something, but the way he assessed risk. She wasn't lying. Her pulse jumped visibly at her throat. Her hands tightened in the blanket, knuckles pale. She was afraid, but not hysterical. Interesting. This room was empty, she whispered, more to herself than to him. It was, he answered. Her gaze flicked around the space, taking in details she hadn't noticed before, the absence of other patients, the subtle security embedded in the stillness. Realization dawned slowly, like the first crack of ice on water. They told me it was safe, she said. Taewon didn't correct her. Safety was relative, and this room, this moment, had shifted the instant she crossed its threshold. Before he could say more, the door opened. Day stepped in and froze. The man had stood beside Taewon through gunfire and bloodshed without flinching, but now his composure fractured. His eyes snapped at the woman, then back to Taewon, alarm flashing across his face. Boss, Day said quietly. She wasn't supposed to be here. Taewon felt the truth of that settle like a weight. The woman's presence wasn't just a mistake. It was a breach layered with consequences. Someone would answer for it. Systems would tighten. Questions would follow. But none of that mattered yet, because the woman was watching him now, eyes wide, waiting for judgment. She's here now, Taewon said. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The room adjusted itself around the statement, gravity shifting subtly in his favor. Day hesitated. What do you want to do? Taewon looked back at her, at the way she sat very still, as if movement might make things worse, at the quiet dignity in her fear, at the trust she had placed unknowingly in a world that rarely deserved it. Nothing, he said. Not yet. Outside the door, guards tightened formation. Somewhere down the corridor, a nurse would soon realize something was wrong. But inside the room, time stretched. Taewon leaned back against the pillows, eyes never leaving Lena Mensa, and for the first time since he'd been brought here bleeding and half-conscious, he felt awake. This room had never been empty. It had been waiting. The silence that settled between them wasn't empty. It pressed gently, like a held breath neither of them was ready to release. Lena sat upright now, the blanket pulled close, her back straight despite the tremor in her hands. She was acutely aware of the man across from her, the weight of his attention, the way the room seemed to organize itself around him. No one spoke. The machines hummed. Somewhere far down the corridor, a cart rattled, then faded. She broke first. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to. Stop, he said. Not sharp, not loud, just final. She froze, words dissolving on her tongue. He watched the way her shoulders tensed, the reflexive apology she had reached for without thinking. Something in his chest tightened. An irritation that wasn't directed at her, but at the invisible hands that had trained her to shrink. This isn't your fault, he added, after a beat. The words landed carefully, like something fragile set down between them. She blinked, looked at him again, as if reassessing. It feels like it is. He almost smiled. Almost. Silence returned, different now, softer at the edges. He noticed details he hadn't meant to. The faint bruise at her temple, yellowed with healing. The way her fingers curled inward when she was uncertain. The steady courage it took to stay in a room where instinct told her to run. She noticed things too. The way he favored one side, the precise control in every movement, the pain he carried without complaint. You're hurt, she said. It wasn't a question. He followed her gaze to the bandage beneath his hospital gown. So are you. She hesitated. Mine isn't visible. Those are often the worst. The word surprised them both. Another stretch of quiet followed. Lena shifted slightly, testing the space, as if deciding how much of herself it was safe to show. I didn't sleep, she said. Before tonight. Not really. He nodded once. Neither did I. She glanced at him then, curiosity flickering through her fear. Does it ever stop? The waiting? For some people, he said, they learn to live inside it. She considered that. That sounds lonely. It is. The honesty slipped out before he could stop it. He didn't regret it. Outside, footsteps approached, paused, then retreated. Day was giving them time, an unspoken courtesy to one hadn't asked for, but understood. This room existed in a fragile pause, suspended between correction and consequence. Lena drew a slow breath. My name is Lena. He didn't answer immediately. Names carried weight. They bound, invited, exposed. He had spent years being addressed by titles, by whispers, by fear. Choi To-won, he said finally. She repeated it under her breath, carefully, as if testing its shape. That's nice. No one had ever said that about his name. A faint crease appeared between his brows. You're not afraid of me. She thought about that, about the way her pulse still raced, about the instinct telling her this man was dangerous, about the other truth, quieter but steadier. I'm afraid, she said. I just don't think fear means I have to be unkind. Something shifted then. Subtle, irreversible. He watched her with renewed focus, not as a problem to be solved, but as a presence to be understood. She met his gaze without challenge, without submission. Just there. I was supposed to rest, she added, almost apologetically. They said my body needed it. And did it, he asked. She shook her head. Not until I got here. The admission lingered between them, fragile and unguarded. A nurse would come soon. Explanations would be demanded. Lines redrawn. This moment, this strange equilibrium, would end. Taewon knew it. So did Lena, though she couldn't have said why. I don't think this was an accident, she murmured. He studied her face, the calm insight beneath the exhaustion. Neither do I. They sat in shared quiet, two wounded people occupying the same breadth of time, neither reaching for the other, neither retreating. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel like a threat. It felt like understanding, unspoken, incomplete, but real. And when the door finally opened, both of them knew something had already been set in motion. The interruption came softly, almost politely. A knock at the door. A pause. Then the quiet click of it opening. The nurse stepped in with a tablet cradled against her chest, her expression neutral, professional, until her eyes lifted and landed on Lena. Confusion flickered. Then concern. Then something sharper, edged with disbelief. Oh, the nurse said. Her gaze darted to Taewon's bed, to the monitors, to the men positioned just outside the doorway. Suits immaculate, posture alert in a way that had nothing to do with hospital protocol. This isn't right, she said slowly. Lena felt the words land like a verdict. I'm sorry, Lena said immediately, instinct overriding sense. She started to push the blanket aside, hands fumbling. They brought me here. I can move. It's fine. Her feet touched the floor, a wave of dizziness following. The room tilted slightly. She steadied herself on the edge of the bed, jaw tightening as she forced herself upright. Please, she added quietly. I'll go. The nurse hesitated, clearly torn between procedure and the tension humming beneath the surface. You're not cleared to be walking yet, she said, glancing down at the tablet. Ms. Mensah, you were assigned to... She stopped, brows knitting together. This room is restricted, she finished. The word hung in the air. Taewon watched Lena closely now, the way she braced herself. The familiar readiness to disappear the moment she became inconvenient. Something cold and unpleasant settled in his chest. She didn't come here on her own, he said. The nurse stiffened, clearly not expecting him to speak. Sir, I understand, but there's been a serious error. This wing, this room, is your responsibility. Taewon replied evenly. The temperature in the room dropped. Not from his tone. He hadn't raised his voice, but from the certainty behind it. The nurse swallowed. I'll need to call my supervisor. Of course, he said. Do that. She nodded quickly and stepped back into the corridor, voice already lowered as she spoke into her phone. Lena stood there, arms wrapped around herself, feeling suddenly exposed. The quiet that followed was different from before, no longer intimate, now edged with inevitability. I didn't mean to cause trouble, Lena said. You didn't, One replied. She shook her head faintly. This is what always happens. I stepped somewhere I don't belong, and suddenly everyone's looking at me like I broke something. The honesty of it hit him harder than he expected. You belong where you're placed, he said. She gave a small, humorless smile. That's the problem. Someone else always decides that. Footsteps approached again, faster this time. A woman in a crisp coat entered, authority written into every line of her posture. She took in the scene with quick, practiced efficiency. I'm Dr. Han, she said. There's been a mix-up. Yes, Tae-won said. There has. Dr. Han turned to Lena, softening slightly. Ms. Mensah, I'm very sorry. You were moved here by mistake. We'll return you to your assigned room immediately. Lena nodded, already reaching for her things. The four tugged at her wrist, reminding her how fragile she still was. She didn't look at Tae-won as she gathered herself, afraid of what she might see or feel. Tae-won spoke again. She stays. Every head turned. Dr. Han hesitated. Sir, with respect, this room is under my care, he said. And so is she. For now. The doctor measured him carefully. Recognizing a line she couldn't cross even if she wanted to. She'll need monitoring, she said finally. She'll have it, he replied. Lena looked up then, startled. You don't have to. He met her gaze. I know. That was all. Dr. Han exhaled slowly. We'll adjust the records, she said, temporarily. As they left, the door closed with finality that made Lena's chest ache. The mistake had been discovered, corrected, reframed. But as Lena settled back onto bed, this time with deliberate care, she realized something else had happened too. For the first time, someone had intervened not to move her away, but to keep her where she was. And whatever consequences followed, they would no longer be hers alone. The removal happened without ceremony. No raised voices. No confrontation. Just a quiet decision made somewhere beyond the walls of the room, where power negotiated with liability and caution won. Lena woke from a shallow sleep to find the air changed. The door was open. Not wide, just enough. The men in black suits were gone. The stillness that had wrapped the room like a shield the night before it thinned, replaced by ordinary hospital noise. Footsteps passed freely now. Voices carried. The sense of being held in place, of being watched over, had vanished. She sat up slowly, heart sinking. A nurse entered moments later, clipboard in hand, eyes careful. Too careful. Ms. Mensah, she said gently, we're moving you back to your assigned room. Lena nodded. She had known this was coming. The protection had never been hers to keep. She dressed quietly, hands steady despite the heaviness pressing behind her ribs. No one mentioned Tae-won's name. No one explained. The four was removed, replaced with bandage and instructions. The nurse avoided her eyes when she apologized again. It's not your fault, Lena said automatically. The words tasted familiar. Old. Her new room was smaller, brighter, shared with another patient who slept with the television on low volume. The curtain between them fluttered each time someone passed. There was no silence here, only exposure. The first sign that something was wrong came that afternoon. Her phone buzzed once. Then again, unknown number. She ignored it at first, assuming it was work or an automated reminder. But when it rang a third time, unease crept in. Hello, she answered cautiously. The line was quiet for a second too long. Ms. Mensah, a man said finally. Polite, detached. You were in the West Wing last night. Her stomach dropped. I was moved there by mistake. Yes, he said. Mistakes attract attention. The line went dead. Lena stared at her phone, pulse racing. She told herself it was nothing, a wrong number, a misunderstanding. But the sense of safety she'd borrowed the night before did not return. It worsened after discharge. Her apartment felt different when she stepped inside. Too quiet, too still. The hallway light flickered. Her neighbor's door, usually cluttered with shoes, was bare. She locked her door, then checked it twice. That night, someone knocked. Not loud, not urgent. 3 measured taps. Lena didn't answer. The knocks came again, slower this time. She stood frozen in her living room, phone clenched in her hand, breath shallow. The silence stretched until she thought maybe she'd imagined it. Then a voice drifted through the door. "We just want to talk." Her knees nearly buckled. She didn't sleep that night, or the next. The calls returned, always from different numbers, always calm, always knowing things they shouldn't. Where she worked, what time she left, the cafe she stopped at when she was too tired to cook. Her world shrank. She began leaving early, taking different routes, keeping her head down. Old habits resurfaced easily. Make yourself small, don't draw attention, endure. But this time, endurance wasn't enough. On the 4th day, she noticed a car parked across from her building. Black, unmarked. It didn't move when she left. It didn't follow her, but it didn't leave either. By evening, her hands were shaking. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone in her lap, staring at a name she hadn't saved but hadn't deleted either. Choi To-won. She remembered the way the room had felt when he was there, the certainty in his voice, the calm with which he had said she would stay. For the first time, she understood what she'd lost when she was removed from that room. Not proximity, protection. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She didn't answer. Instead, she pressed call. It rang once, twice. He picked up on the 3rd. "Yes," he said, as if he'd been waiting. Lena swallowed, voice unsteady but clear. "They found me." There was a pause on the line. Not surprise, but calculation. "I know," he replied. Her eyes burned. "I didn't want to bother you." "You're not," he said. "You were never meant to handle this alone." Tears slid down her cheeks, silent and relieved. "I thought I was safe," she whispered. "You were," he said, "until they moved you." On the other end of the line, something shifted. Orders were already being given, lines already redrawn. "Stay where you are," Taewon said. "I'm coming." And as Lena leaned back against the wall, heart pounding but no longer alone, she understood the truth at last. The mistake hadn't been placing her in the wrong room. It had been taking her out of it. The first thing Lena noticed was how fast everything changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just efficiently. The black car appeared outside her building less than 15 minutes after the call ended. It didn't idle. It didn't announce itself. It simply existed where the unmarked car had been before, closer now, unmistakably deliberate. Her phone vibrated once. "Come downstairs." No name, no explanation. Her hands trembled as she slipped on her shoes, every instinct screaming that stepping outside was a mistake. But another truth pressed just as hard. Staying where she was had already proven worse. 2 men stood by the car when she reached the sidewalk. Suits, earpieces, eyes that scanned the street without appearing to look at anything at all. "Ms. Mensah," one of them said, opening the door. Not a question. The interior was quiet, leather cool against her skin. The door closed. Locks clicked. The car pulled away smoothly, as if the city itself parted for it. No one spoke. They drove not to a police station or a hospital, but to a building that didn't announce its importance. Glass and steel understated, guarded by absence rather than force. She was escorted inside, through corridors that swallowed sound, up an elevator that required no visible buttons. When the doors opened, Taewon was already waiting. He stood near the window, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to reveal the controlled strength in his forearms. The city stretched behind him, distant and obedient. He turned when he sensed her, dark eyes sharp but steady. "You came," he said. She nodded. Her voice wouldn't work yet. "Sit," he added gently. She did. perching on the edge of the chair, fingers laced tight in her lap. The silence felt different here, not threatening but expectant, as if the room itself waited for truth. "You should know who you're dealing with," he said at last. Her stomach clenched. "I think I already do." A faint curve touched his mouth. Not amusement. Acceptance. "My name carries weight," he continued. "Enough that mistakes around me don't stay mistakes for long." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He simply spoke, and the world he described unfolded with it. He told her about influence that moved through companies and ports instead of streets, about loyalty enforced not by fear alone, but by precision, about enemies who smiled publicly and planned quietly, about the cost of being seen as untouchable. "I don't run," he said. "I control." The words settled heavily between them. Lena listened, heart pounding, as pieces clicked into place. The guarded hospital room, the men in suits, the calls that had followed her discharge. She saw now how close she had drifted to something vast and dangerous without realizing it. "You're the reason," she said slowly. "They started watching me." "Yes." The admission was immediate, unflinching. "And you didn't tell me," she whispered. "I didn't know if you'd stay," he replied, "or if you should." She looked up then, meeting his gaze fully. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know." The honesty in his voice startled her more than any threat could have. "I never intended to pull you into my world," he went on. "But once you were seen beside me, once you were placed under my shadow," he paused. "People assumed you mattered." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I've spent my whole life being invisible. Suddenly that's dangerous." "Yes," he said quietly. To them. The weight of it pressed down on her chest. Fear, anger, a strange, aching clarity. "So what happens now?" she asked. Taewon stepped closer, not invading her space, but closing the distance enough that she could feel the gravity of him. "Now," he said, "you stop pretending this will pass on its own." She swallowed. "And if I don't want protection that comes with this?" His eyes softened just slightly. "Then I'll help you disappear." The word should have frightened her. Instead, they steadied something inside her. "And if I do, then no one touches you without consequence." Lena breathed out slowly. For the first time since leaving the hospital, the shaking in her hands eased. She saw him clearly now, not as a monster, not as a savior, but as a man who lived behind layers of control because chaos had once nearly destroyed him. A man who had woken to find a gentle stranger in his guarded space and chosen not to erase her. "I don't want to disappear," she said. "I just want to be safe." Taewon nodded. "Then stay where I can see you." Outside the glass, the city moved on, unaware that lines had been redrawn within it. And Lena understood then that the man behind the curtain was not hiding from the world. He was holding it at bay. Protection, Lena learned, didn't always arrive like a shield. Sometimes it arrived like order. The next morning unfolded with quiet precision. A car waited downstairs. Not the same one as before. This one bore no familiarity at all, which felt intentional. Taewon didn't accompany her. He didn't need to. His presence lingered anyway, threaded through the instructions given in low voices, through the way doors opened before she reached them. She was taken to a different apartment, smaller than she expected, sunlit, unassuming, the kind of place you wouldn't look at twice if you passed it on the street. Temporary, the woman who handed her the keys said. Calm, efficient, "You'll be comfortable here." Lena nodded, unsure what to say. Comfort felt like a foreign language lately. Her phone buzzed the moment the door closed behind her. "You'll stay here today." She typed back before she could overthink it. "Okay." Another message followed. "Eat. Rest. Answer only calls from me." She smiled faintly at that. Not because it was controlling, but because it wasn't. It was clear, measured, protective without pretense. Outside, things shifted. The car across from her old building disappeared. The call stopped. The men who'd knocked at her door found their inquiries redirected into silence. One of them missed a meeting he was never late to. Another discovered accounts frozen, without explanation. Questions rose, then died unanswered. No threats were made. No warnings issued. Power didn't need to announce itself. Taewon moved pieces without being seen. A conversation here. A contract reconsidered there. A reminder delivered through channels no one spoke about openly. The message was unmistakable to those who understood the language. She is not available. Lena felt the difference before she understood it. The way the air around her seemed to loosen. The way her shoulders dropped without permission. The way she slept through the night for the first time since leaving the hospital. That evening, Taewon called. "Did you eat?" he asked. "Yes." "What?" She hesitated. "Soup and bread." A pause. "Tomorrow you'll eat more." She laughed softly. "Is that an order?" "No," he said. "An intention." The words settled warmly in her chest. They didn't talk long. They didn't need to. His voice carried steadiness, not reassurance. He didn't tell her she was safe. He acted as if it were already true. Days passed. Her work resumed cautiously. Someone else handled deliveries. Meetings were rescheduled without explanation. She noticed things being smoothed before they could fray. Problems resolving themselves before she had to ask. One afternoon, curiosity finally overcame restraint. "What did you do?" she asked him. He didn't pretend not to understand. "Enough." That's not an answer. It's the only one you need. She leaned back against the couch, sunlight warm against her face. "You're very controlled," she said. "Yes." "Does it ever get heavy?" He was quiet for a moment. "Only when I forget why." "And why do you?" she asked gently. He exhaled slowly. "Because chaos is expensive." She smiled. "That sounds lonely." It was. The admission came easier this time. Later, when she stepped outside to buy groceries, she realized she wasn't scanning the street anymore. Her steps were unhurried, her breathing steady. She felt seen, not watched, but held in awareness. That night, Taewon visited, not with an entourage, not with ceremony, just him. He stood in the doorway, coat draped over his arm, eyes assessing the space before settling on her. "Is this sufficient?" "Yes," she said honestly. "It's quiet." "Good." They stood there for a moment, something unspoken passing between them. She realized then that protection, for him, wasn't about possession. It was about responsibility. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. He met her gaze. "I chose to." The choice echoed. She nodded once. "Thank you." He inclined his head slightly, accepting it without ceremony. As he left, Lena understood something new. Power didn't always announce itself with force. Sometimes it chose to stand quietly between you and the world and let you breathe. Destiny announced its price quietly. It arrived not as danger, but as consequence. Lena felt it first in the small things. The way her name stopped appearing on certain schedules. The way conversations paused when she entered rooms she used to belong in easily. Friends she hadn't heard from in months suddenly checked in, with questions disguised as concern. Curiosity sharpened just enough to cut. "You seem different," one of them said over coffee. "Busy." Careful, Lena thought. The word they didn't say. She wasn't hiding, but she was no longer unguarded. And that, she realized, was the cost of being seen under Taewon's shadow. That evening, she asked him about it. They were standing by the window in the quiet apartment, the city glowing below like something distant and unreal. Taewon listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable, hands loosely folded behind his back. "They're pulling away," Lena said finally. "Not because of anything I did, but because of what they think I'm connected to." "Yes," he said. "Just that." She turned to him. "You knew this would happen." "I knew it was possible." "Then why didn't you warn me?" He met her gaze. For once, there was no calculation in his eyes, only truth. "Because you wouldn't have stayed." The honesty landed hard. "I don't want to be untouchable," she said quietly. "I just wanted to feel safe." Taewon nodded once. "Those two things are rarely separate." She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "You lose people either way, don't you?" "Yes." The single syllable carried years of loss. Later that night, the price came due for him as well. A call he didn't take rang twice before stopping. A message followed, brief and precise. a reminder of alliances strained, of attention drawn where silence had once been enough. He stood alone on the balcony long after Lena went to bed, the night air cool against the skin. Protecting her had required adjustments, quiet concessions, not to his enemies, but to his own structure, the kind that weakened nothing immediately, but left marks over time. Someone had noticed. They always did. The next morning, he told her, "There are people who will test this," he said over breakfast. "Not you. Me." Lena stilled. "Because of me? Because I allowed you to matter." The word sat heavy between them. "I never asked for that," she said. "I know," he replied. "But choice doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient." She looked down at her hands, at the steadiness she'd regained, at the life slowly rebuilding itself around this fragile center. "What happens if I walk away?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. "If you leave," he said carefully, "I make sure you are unreachable. New rhythms. New name if you want it. Your life continues clean. And you? That's irrelevant." She looked up sharply. "It's not." For a moment, something dangerous flickered behind his composure. Not anger, but exposure. "I don't attach lightly," he said, "and I don't undo easily." The truth of it made her chest ache. She stepped closer, not touching, but near enough to be felt. "I don't want to disappear," she said, "but I don't want to be the reason you lose ground." He studied her then, not as a responsibility, not as a liability, but as a woman choosing clarity over fear. "Destiny," he said slowly, "is rarely generous. It gives connection, then charges for it." "And the price?" she asked. "Awareness," he said. "Risk, the loss of simpler versions of ourselves." She nodded. "I've already lost those." "So have I." They stood there, balanced on the edge of something neither of them could fully control. At last, Lena spoke. "I'm still here," she said, "not because I need protection, but because I choose to stand in what this is." Taewon's breath left him in a quiet exhale. "Then understand this," he said. "If you stay, you don't belong to my world." She waited. "My world," he continued, "adjusts around you." The weight of the promise, and its cost, settled between them. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the reckoning unfolding in a quiet room. Destiny had made its offer. They were both still standing, and neither was untouched. Morning arrived without urgency. Soft light slipped through the curtains, resting gently on the edges of the room as if testing whether it was welcome. Lena awoke slowly, not to fear or anticipation, but to a quiet certainty she hadn't felt in a long time. She was safe, not hidden, not running, safe in a way that didn't require her to disappear. She sat up, letting the realization settle into her body. No racing heart, no instinct to check the locks twice. The stillness around her felt earned, not borrowed. When she stepped into the living area, Taewon was already there. He stood near the window, as he often did, watching the city with a focus that suggested he was seeing more than movement and light. He turned when he heard her, his gaze steady, familiar now in a way that surprised them both. "You slept," he said. "Yes," she replied, "all the way through." A small pause followed. Satisfaction crossed his face, not possessive, not proud, simply relieved. They shared breakfast in quiet understanding. No plans were discussed, no instructions given. The world outside would continue to adjust, but for this moment, neither of them needed to direct it. Lena was the first to speak. "I've been thinking," she said, "about the hospital." He looked at her, attentive. "Everyone keeps calling it a mistake," she continued. "The wrong room, the wrong timing." "And you don't agree," he said. She smiled faintly. "I don't think accidents feel like that." He waited. "When I woke up beside you," she said slowly, choosing each word, "I should have been terrified. But instead, something in me felt seen, like my life had crossed a line it was always meant to reach." Taewon turned fully toward her now. "In my world," he said, "we don't believe in coincidence." "I know," she replied. "Neither do I anymore." Later that day, he walked her outside, not because she needed an escort, but because he wanted to. They moved through the city, without interruption. No lingering stares. No unease. The air around them felt clear, as if boundaries had finally been drawn in the right places. At the corner where they paused, Lena stopped. "This is where I go back to myself," she said. He understood. "And this is where I let you." She met his gaze, eyes steady. "I'm not leaving." "I know." Not a challenge. A recognition. "You didn't pull me into your world," she said. "I stepped into it. And you didn't push me away." "You walked in," he said quietly. "And everything changed." For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said it. This was never an accident. The words carried weight, not just meaning, but acceptance. "When you were placed in that room," he continued, "every safeguard failed, every rule bent. That doesn't happen without reason." She felt the truth of it settle deep in her chest. "You could have erased me from it," she said. "Yes." "But you didn't." "No." "Why?" Taewon held her gaze, unflinching. "Because destiny doesn't announce itself with force. It arrives quietly, and you either recognize it or you lose it." Lena inhaled slowly, the city breathing with her. "Then this is me recognizing it," she said. She stepped forward, not into his arms, not into his shadow, but into her own ground, solid and sure. He didn't reach for her. He didn't need to. "I'm choosing safety," she said. "Not fear, not escape." "And I'm choosing responsibility," he replied. "Not possession." They stood there, two lives aligned not by chaos, but by intention. As Lena turned to leave, she felt no pull backward, no fear of what followed. She was stepping forward, whole. Behind her, Taewon watched until she disappeared into the flow of the city. He didn't smile. He simply said the truth aloud, to no one and everything. Destiny,